I don't hear myself through my headphones. Yes, man. Like, I feel real good about this right now.
Pay attention, because you are now listening to Permission to Speak Freely.
So when me and Damon initially, wanted to start the podcast, what we wanted to do was like just have a palatable conversation for like people that could just straight up understand, just kind of like real talk, understand what we're talking about. And so recently, I always say I picked up a book, but it's like really just audio books. But so I recently came across a book, right? And it was about PTSD, The Soldier's Guide to PTSD, How to Know Shit, Reclaim Your Life. And when it comes to books about PTSD and stuff like that, I normally expect a lot of medical terms and jargon that I'm just not used to. But when as in an audio book, when I get to an F-bomb within the first 60 seconds, I'm like, yeah, this is for me. Like, this shit is going to be good. You know what I'm saying? And then I realized, like, as I'm reading a book, though, it wasn't really about the F-bomb, It was about the conversation that, we decided that we could have, and it was super palatable about something that's not always very palatable. Right. In that book, the author spoke through that book, right? Audio book, so you get a professional audiobook reader. But I was like, yo, whoever wrote this book, I can hear her voice loud and clear. And that author is Virginia Cruse. And we have Virginia Cruse here with us today. So welcome to Permission to Speak Freely. It's I'm so happy to have you here right now.
I am really thrilled to be here, team. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Hey, Damon, you good over there?
Yeah. Oh, I'm great, man. I'm very, very excited too, man. Like, one thing about this book, when I was reading through it and going through it, it kind of relates to more than just PTSD. Like, knowing yourself, right? In order for you to get help, in order for you to do anything, you got to identify it, right? That's your first step, knowing that you have something, something is going on with me. So that's just a little sneak peek, man. Just identifying that this could be me. I could be, like, a lot of times we hear it on TV, we hear it from our friends, but it's hard for you to say, you know what, this could be me too. This could be something I'm going through. And then the fact of you have some identifiers out there, and you hit it on the head when you said, like, some people think they have to have 8 different things, to qualify for PTSD, but it's not. It's not. So I got educated, so I love the book, man. I love the book. Yeah. I'd love to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying that. And I really value, because so we were talking before the show, what I love about your show the most is that you're really talking to the fleet. And you guys clearly love sailors. And, because nobody becomes a podcaster for the money or the fame. You guys are in this because you love this. You love sailors and you love communicating with them. And, there are a lot of misconceptions about PTSD, and especially as it pertains to the Navy. And that's something I take pretty personally, as a former naval officer. So, I often, I think the number one thing that I hear, about PTSD is that I don't deserve to have PTSD, or that PTSD is somehow reserved for maybe the special warfare community, or, for people who, we pejoratively call people fobbits, or, folks who were, maybe on a ship or whatnot. And it's like, oh no, I don't deserve to have PTSD. And it's like, wait a minute. Nobody deserves to have this. I'm a really nice person. Like, we're all, doing this for the love of what we do. None of us deserve to have PTSD, but PTSD is something that happens to you, not something wrong with you. But something that we do within the military community that I don't hear in other communities is that we trauma compare. And so this is the idea that we say, my trauma is more traumatic than your trauma. So that's not something I'm going to hear like at a battered women's shelter. It's not something I'm going to hear with refugees. But we do hear this within the military. Oh, you only deployed to Iraq. Well, I went to Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, you were
Yeah.
only in one training accident. Well, I was in 4. It's like, shit, this is not a contest. This is not a
Right.
contest. Can we agree that all trauma can suck, and it sucks equally, and it hurts us in different ways? And a lot of times I think the Navy is left out of this conversation. You know, there's this belief that if you didn't serve, you know, if you weren't in ground combat with the Navy SEALs, you know, capturing Osama bin Laden, that somehow you are not worthy of having PTSD. And that's just a lot of crap. Now, I want to be really clear. I don't think that people are being malicious when they say,
Mhm.
you know, my trauma is more traumatic than your trauma. I think that a lot of times, especially for sailors, we're not believed when we come forward, and you know, and this is especially
Yeah.
for women, especially for sailors of color and those who identify as queer. We are not believed. You know,
Mhm.
there is a lot of gaslighting that goes on with mental health. It is what it is. Um, but we're not believed. But there are unintended second and third order effects when we trauma compare. So, most importantly, it discourages folks from getting the help that they need because everyone can come back from their PTSD. Everyone deserves to heal from their trauma. So, but you know, so if you're hearing folks who are trauma comparing, maybe just a gentle nudge and saying, you know, knock that shit off, because that is
Yeah.
not it's not only not helpful, but it's hurtful, and it hurts other sailors. And especially when we hear chiefs talking about, you know, junior sailors hear everything. I remember when
Mhm.
I was enlisted, I listened all the time. You know, it's like raising kids. They hear everything. Sailors are just really smart.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And our older sellers, they compare a whole lot, you know, like intergenerational, you know, they trauma compare a whole lot. Like, well, you wasn't here during World War II, or when I was in Vietnam, or right after, you know, Gulf War, September. Like, these sellers, what do they have? What do they? Because that brings me to, like, when I was on shore duty, I had to do a project for film school. When I was in film school, I called it Duty Blues, and it was about sellers with PTSD,
Mm.
and it was an ET2, I want to say, at the time that I spoke to. ET never saw combat. He's like, yeah. He was like, I got PTSD. You could do it on me. I'm like, yo, dude, you don't have PTSD, man. Like, and I'm like, how does he have? I'm like, so I started asking, I'm like, yo, were you like in combat or something? He's like, no, I never. I had PTSD from before I joined the military. And I said, okay, so and at this time in my life, 20-some-year-old E5, I only thought that PTSD could come from, like like you said earlier, like just being a Navy SEAL, just being in the shit. I did not know. I'm
Mhm.
like, how did this guy get PTSD? And it's crazy because all I did was go on Google. Like, I was like, hey, Google, like, can like somebody get PTSD that wasn't in battle? And it was like, yes. It could be from some sexual, it could be, a lot of different things that would give somebody PTSD. So that was the beginning of my education on PTSD. What was the beginning of your education on PTSD, Virginia?
Oh my gosh. Well, hopefully none of your listeners want to be a trauma therapist when they grow up. That
Hmm.
that certainly wasn't my goal. So I started out. I was enlisted in the Army. I'm an Arabic speaker, so I started out as an Army interrogator and was pretty busy right at the beginning of the war cycle. And
Hmm.
after my third deployment in 2008, I was stationed in Germany, and I had a bit of an incident, and I was voluntold to go to mental health, which didn't really end well. So, spoiler alert. So, I was really actually glad to have the opportunity to go to mental health because I knew something was wrong with me. I was drinking all the time. I was picking fights with people I really care about.
Yeah.
Picking
Mhm.
fights, blowing up my perfectly awesome marriage, picking fights at work. I wasn't sleeping. I was paranoid. I knew that something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. So I was living in Germany at the time, and I went to the local hospital that was serving troops. And I got to talk to a no shit full bird colonel.
Mm.
So there's an '06 type military psychiatrist. I was so excited for the opportunity. Now, this guy was what we in the Army call a slick sleeve, meaning that he didn't have a combat patch. And I poured my heart out to this guy for my 50-minute hour. And because I knew that something was wrong. At the end of that 50 minutes, he eyeballed me and he said, Virginia, I can tell that you are really struggling, but I can't help you if you don't choose to be honest with me.
Mm.
And so I asked for some clarification. And he said, we all know women don't serve in combat. And yeah.
Come on.
And it's worth noting that before this happened, I was already suicidal. I was thinking of killing myself all the time. I already knew something was wrong. I got kicked while I was down by another soldier in uniform.
Whose job is to help.
Precise. And we have to remember too, there's such an unequal relationship there. Here's a very senior field grade officer, medical professional, mental health professional, and me. And so I was diagnosed. I was escorted out of the building. That all didn't end very well. But I was diagnosed. Yeah. Well, I was diagnosed.
I'll show you combat. You want to see combat?
I was already not okay, and that was my straw. And it was. What did I do? I jumped right into a bottle, and I realized at that moment. That was kind of my come to Jesus moment. I was like, oh shit. Like if I don't figure out what this is, it's going to kill me. I'm going to die. I'm going to no shit die if I don't figure out what this is. I'm either going to kill myself, pretty likely, or I'm going to slowly go crazy and unravel. And I was terrified of that. And so I made a decision in that moment. I went back to grad school. Because that's what folks in the Intel community do. We just keep going back to school. And so I went to graduate school. And, here I am, I don't do math in public, but 14, 15 years later, talking with y'all. And I wish that my story were a one-off. But what I have found is that, unfortunately, this is a pretty ubiquitous experience of folks going to mental health or folks being voluntold and really being gaslit, told that, you don't have a problem or you have an attitude problem. Or, maybe, PTSD is sort of a roots and fruits problem. So if you think about like the roots of a tree and then, you see the fruit on the outside, the root can be in trauma. But what we see in sailors is maybe the underage drinking, we're seeing the bar fights, we're seeing the DUIs, we're seeing the domestic violence calls. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing the UA, the unauthorized, people going AWOL. And, that's what we're seeing. And a lot of times this is rooted in trauma. And gosh, I made it, when I wrote this book, when I wrote The Soldier's Guide to PTSD, I really wrote the book that I wish that I had when I started this journey, because I made every single mistake that you could make. I mean, not to brag, but I blew it up. I was awesome. I made every single mistake along the way. And that's not okay. And you're all having conversations with sailors all the time. And, as I was telling you before the show, one of my NCOs told me, when I was young, much younger, hey, Cruse, are you picking up what I'm putting down? You picking up what I'm putting down? And I never forgot that. And I think when it comes to PTSD, we're not having those really authentic, very real conversations. Like you said, Damo, when you went to Google, yet if you go to Google and it's like, okay, what's the outcome of somebody who has PTSD? It's like, oh shit, I'm probably going to kill myself. This will not end well. Spoiler alert, this will not end well. But that's really not fact. What we know is that PTSD can be treated most of the time. But maybe we have, this fantasy about what treatment looks like. a question I often get from readers is, well, how am I supposed to forget about my PTSD? And it's like, oh, okay, so that's not a thing.
Yeah,
That's not
right.
a thing. So the goal of PTSD treatment is not that we develop some sort of amnesia, which would be awesome. Can we be real about that? That would be awesome if we could forget being raped or trafficked or being sold for drugs or being hurt or being, harassed. That would be awesome if we could forget that. But the goal of treatment is to get to the point where our symptoms that keep us from our everyday life. So keep us from our roles, keep us from being a great dad, keep us from being a great NCO, a great sailor. Um, the hypervigilance, the nightmares, the flashbacks. What the goal is to get those under control so that we can continue with our no shit walking, talking everyday life and really and that's the subtitle of our book, No Shit,
Mm-hmm.
Reclaim Our Life. And we absolutely can do that if we have the facts, if we have the no shit facts about PTSD. Otherwise, you can do what I did and, chase my tail for a while and for a long while and feel really suicidal and then, get voluntold to go to substance abuse treatment, et cetera, et cetera. But, that's the goal of the Soldier's Guide to PTSD. It's just to say, listen, you don't have to live like this.
Yeah. So I feel like when you started, I feel like I heard you mention before that when you first started, like after school, you were speaking a lot of that medical jargon and a lot of those terms, and you kind of course corrected and decided to, like, let me break this down in a way that I would understand it based off what your NCO said, like that he inspired you. That are you picking up what I'm
Absolutely.
putting down? Right. That was a
Absolutely.
thing, right? Where you, yeah,
Uh,
I read that. I'm listening.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to overspeak you. That wasn't my intent.
No, that's cool.
Um, but yeah, I've never forgotten that. You
Yeah.
know, one of my first gigs that I got out of school, we have to do all these internship hours and practicum hours, which is wise because you don't want somebody just running around your head. But I
Hmm.
ended up teaching. And I started teaching at an inpatient psychiatric facility that served active duty soldiers, sailors, even coasties, who were really struggling with, for the most part, post traumatic stress disorder. And my job was as the psych ed teacher to kind of teach, what is PTSD, what is it not, and they gave
Hmm.
me this curriculum and and you've all been to you've all done your time in Newport, so you've spent your time on the podium, teaching and learning how to teach. And what I found in my podium time there was that, wow, all this medical jargon, I've got the stare. I'm just getting the stare, and no one's picking up what I'm putting down. So my goal was, how can I translate this? How can I translate medicalese, PTSDs into English so that people
Hmm.
can pick up what I'm putting down? Because sailors are smart. Holy shit, sailors
Yeah.
are smart. We train we train sailors how to fix jets. We train sailors how to fly drones. We these are some of the smartest young people, full stop.
Hmm.
They absolutely can learn about PTSD. This is not rocket surgery. This is a lot easier than going to A school. This is not difficult. And I really think that when we give sailors those tools to understand, like, this is what PTSD is, this is what it's not. And here's what you can do. Here are your courses of action. And I promise I'm not going to pull out an ORM chart, but we can really, it's like, okay, here's COA alpha, COA beta, here we
Hmm.
go. Here are your courses of action. Here's what you can do. What are you going to choose? What is going to work for you? What is going to work for your sailor? What's going to work for your unit? Because all roads lead to Rome.
Yeah.
We have 3 evidence-based treatments for PTSD. So in evidence-based treatment, and I'm sorry, I'm geeking out on you. I get super
No, it's all good. We
excited.
listening.
That's
We
great.
listening.
I
That's great.
do. I geek out about this shit because it's like, holy shit.
Yeah. And more people need to hear it. Like more people need to hear about it. And that's what really kind of touched me with the book, because like I said already, it was palatable, but it was palatable because it was from one service member to another. Like it wasn't like I was talking to somebody and they was giving me a sermon, like from a sermon from a mount. Like it was like, oh, this
Shit.
like is like it almost feel like we just leaning over in our racks and you just kind of breaking some stuff down. You know what I mean? And that's that was really really good. Even the EBTs, the evidence based treatments and some of that stuff that I know you're about to talk about.
Well, I'm super excited
Yeah.
because we're going to give all of your listeners a link to download their own copy of the audiobook.
The full book?
Yeah.
They get the
Yeah.
full book? Oh man, I'm jealous.
That's
They're getting
great.
the full. Why not? Why not?
That is
This is,
great.
Yeah, no,
you
that's
guys
good.
love
That's real
sailors,
good.
and what
Yeah, we
better
love them.
gift can we give to them than to empower themselves?
Yeah, and y'all need to read it. It's super easy to read.
Listen, yeah.
And the book is easier to not easier. It's just as easy to digest as the audiobook, because I took a second to look at the book. I said, "Oh man, I could read this a million times too." So you wrote it, you self-proofed it, you wrote it in a way that was so easy for us to kind of digest,
I
and I
appreciate
appreciate that.
that. Well, thank you for saying so. Sailors don't have a lot of time, but they
Mhm.
all have a commute for the most
Yeah,
part. Can we get real? So a lot,
Yeah.
and this is something I think you had said, Damo, that it's 3 hours. For some of your sailors in the DC area, you can knock this out, in one afternoon on the
yeah,
Beltway.
that's right.
So
Yeah. Yep. One afternoon, and then reread it. And like what I like the most is you started clearing the room. In my words, you started clearing the rumor mill first. So let's start off by talking about what PTSD is not.
yeah,
Let's start there, and then we work our way from there. So I did appreciate that.
I thanks. There are so many rumors about PTSD that they're just so ubiquitous. And what
Mhm.
really chaps my ass about the rumors is this isn't just the scuttle. These are things that I have heard from other licensed mental health professionals. I say again, other licensed mental health professionals. I was like, the fuck, what? No.
Yeah.
No, your job is to, and it's like hearing again, we all know women don't serve in combat. It's like, really? Really?
That's crazy.
It is. But these rumors are out there and it's not okay. And one of the number one rumors, and the number one rumor that I put in the book, is that PTSD has no cure. And that's not
Yeah.
true. So we believe, and I hear this in so many ways. I'll never, and I there's one sailor in particular who comes to mind, and I actually had a vignette of her in the book, that you might remember. She brilliant young lady, and she had tried all evidence-based treatments for PTSD, and I was serving on something called a kind of a combined treatment team. So that's when everybody gets together and we try to come up with what's what. So I sat down with this young woman and I talked with her, and she was getting drummed out of the Navy um, for her PTSD. And she had tried all the evidence-based treatments and they hadn't worked, and it didn't make sense. None of it made sense. She's really bright. She was smarter than her peers. She worked really hard and it wasn't adding up. So I sat down with her and I asked her what we call in the book the big two. So these
Hmm.
are the big two questions that we have to honestly ask and very honestly answer before we can even try treatment. So the big two questions are: do we believe change is possible? And do we want to change? And those are not,
Mm,
those are cringy. They're cringy.
powerful.
Those are
Yeah.
feeling hurters right there. That's the how does that make you feel sort of afterwards.
Yeah.
And I sat down with her and I asked her the first question. I said, do you believe it's possible that you could work with the treatment team and get to a point where your PTSD symptoms have gotten manageable enough that you could stay in the Navy? She looked right at me. She said, no, I know that's not possible. And so, this is when being an interrogator always helps. Like, this is the most analogous skill set ever. So I didn't react, and I was like, inside I'm shitting myself. But I was like, tell me more. And she said, well, my psychiatrist back on base, and not to be disclosed, but my I'm not mine, not the same as Germany, so not that, but a very large naval facility. My psychiatrist back on base told me that I can go through all this, but at the end of the day, there's no cure for PTSD, and I'm probably just going to end up killing myself.
Damn.
Yeah. This is and this sailor was at 18 years, by the way. Outstanding service. Outstanding service, getting drummed out right before retirement, and didn't want that. And so I was like, all right, let's start the re-education campaign. Let's talk about this. And I explained to her, what the goals of PTSD treatment are. Yeah, you're not going to forget this, but PTSD we can certainly get to a point where you are able to manage. In fact, this works for most people most of the time. So kind of circling back to those evidence-based treatments, even in the Department of Veteran Affairs, which is the biggest bullshit bureaucracy, full stop. Okay. We have three evidence-based treatments for PTSD. So that's prolonged exposure therapy, cognitive processing therapy, and then something called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Ooh, big words, got an acronym, EMDR. So these three evidence-based treatments they're tested a lot in the way that we would test like a vaccine or a drug trial. So, these were developed decades ago. Like, for example, prolonged exposure was developed for the Israeli army. This, and they have been tested. So they've been tested, these long trials over a long period of time out of decades, literally thousands of service members to see if they work. And then the person who does the study will write it up, and then we'll see if it's replicated. And what we know is that there are three evidence-based treatments that even the VA is like, yeah, these work for most people most of the time. So we'll break it down and we'll just use the Pareto rule, 80-20. So it works for, we've got three courses of action that work for most people most of the time. So we've got our course of action alpha, we've got EMDR, course of action, Bravo. We've got, prolonged exposure, and then the cognitive processing therapy for Charlie. So let's say that you have a sailor who goes and they try prolonged exposure, and then for whatever reason, it doesn't work for them. And there are a lot of reasons why evidence-based treatments don't work. It's 20%. If I had an 80% chance of winning the lottery, I absolutely would play. But I would also play if I had a 20% chance. It's huge. I'd buy 5 tickets. I'd be okay with that. So we know already, and when I say we, therapists, researchers, we know going in that there is going to be a significant chunk of people for whom that evidence-based treatment just doesn't work. And that is totally okay. Doesn't mean you're FUBAR. Doesn't mean you're beyond hope. It means that for whatever reason, and there are tons of them, that didn't work. So you go to course of action Bravo, you go to Charlie. Let's say you exhaust all three of these evidence-based treatments that even the VA recognizes. There are a lot more evidence-based treatments, though, gentlemen. Yeah. There really are. They're not accepted by the VA because, the VA is not going to give you, MDMA or ayahuasca or pot. That's just not a thing. But, we have the DoD Center for Excellence for PTSD Research. It's in San Antonio, Texas. So proud. And it's called Strong Star. And your listeners can find them at strongstar.org. And these researchers are unbelievable. And they are researching things like the God shot, the stellate ganglion block. They are researching all of these family based treatments, different ways to skin the same cat. There are many evidence based treatments. So if somebody goes through those 3 evidence based treatments, say at their VA facility or their military treatment facility, or over in Norfolk, then that doesn't mean that they're shit out of luck. That it means one of 2 things. Maybe it's not PTSD. And actually, this happens all the time. This happens all the time. It could be something different. So PTSD is one of those disorders that always comes to the party with friends. So it's what we call a co-occurring disorder. It's a real joiner. Always shows up with its battle buddies. And the 5 most common buddies that PTSD brings to the party that I see in military service members is anxiety, depression, especially alcohol abuse. So we call these substance use disorders. We don't see a lot of that because we get piss tested all the time. Then we see OCD. That means obsessive compulsive disorders. And we see eating disorders, especially in men, especially in naval special warfare.
So I heard you bring that up before about the special warfare, and it made me curious because these guys are in shape, right? These are guys that's like in shape all the time, working out all the time, and they develop eating disorders from experience and research. That's what we is it like junk food, like bad stuff?
No, that's an awesome question. Thank you for asking. So eating disorders, it's not just binging and purging. So this isn't just eating a bunch of junk food and then throwing it up. And I'm not an expert in eating disorders, but man, if you have a sailor with an eating disorder, please get them to mental health to get an eating disorder specialist, because it is by far the most deadly mental health disorder there is. It will fucking kill you. It will fucking kill you. But we see this with over exercising. And we see this with, I'm not going to the gym once a day. I'm going to the gym 4 times a day. I'm going to go do P90X 3 times a day. And I get it. So let's think about the why behind that what. So we remember that criterion Charlie for PTSD is avoidance. And we'll get into that a little bit more, maybe. That makes so much sense with PTSD. Because who wants to think about being raped or holding your buddy while they're dying or getting blown up? We don't want to do that. Who would want to do that? So avoidance makes a shit ton of sense. We will go way, way out of our way to avoid anything that reminds us of our trauma. To include really devoting ourselves to our workout, really devoting ourselves to micromanaging my diet, really devote myself to intermittent fasting, really devote, and I am not throwing any stones. I realize that this is a feeling hurter, and direct all of your mean tweets to me. But we need to talk about this. We need to talk about this in a way that is not shame based, because this happens. It happens a lot, and we need to not shut up about this. Eating disorders happen a lot. Over exercising, it's a control thing, just like OCD. Obsessive compulsive disorder. So we see this, and again, not an expert on OCD, want to put that out there. We see this a lot with children who are survivors of trauma. And it makes sense. I may not be able to control if the adults in my life are selling me for opioids, selling me sexually for opioids. But you know what I can control? I can control whether my figurines are 1/4 of an inch by 1/4 of an inch apart exactly. I can control whether I wash my hands 20 times. I can control, tapping the doorknob. So think back to your, your basic NCOs classes. You remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs? So we've got that triangle there. And at the bottom, we talk about what we need. And then at the top, we've got this little pinnacle of self-actualization. Whatever. But
Yeah,
down at the
yeah, we learned
bottom,
about it.
oh yeah, I mean, that gets shoved down everybody's throat, it seems
Yeah,
like. But down at the bottom there, we've got that safety and security. We need to feel safe. We need to feel secure. We need to feel structure. So you remember, when your kids were young, all your parenting coaches would say, hey, make sure that it's really important to give your kids structure, put them to bed at the same time, same meal time, same this time. And that's because the brain doesn't understand or really can't differentiate on kind of a meta level between safety and structure. Structure is very safe. Structure feels safe. Kids love structure. Some sailors love structure. I hate change. I'm a therapist. I'm not a fan. I don't like change. But when change and PTSD, remember what we're reacting to. So, when we redeploy, when we come back from the deployed environment, when we survive a trauma afterwards, that's a lot of change. And we are just trying to normalize. We are just trying to get homeostasis, stability. And that's why, we will avoid. That's why we will jump right into our work. That's why we're going to jump right into our PT program. And this is an opportunity for you, Damo, to brag about your planks.
Yeah. Hey, everybody, world. How would David say world? I did my planks. And I don't like to brag. If I did like to brag, I would say that I did these planks in 3 minutes and 28 seconds. But since I don't like to brag, I'm going to just be quiet about getting these planks in 3 minutes and 28 seconds. If you want to come challenge me, come challenge me. You know what I'm saying? I'm ready for you. I'm not going to mention the push-ups. I'm not going to talk about those push-ups, but I did those planks in 3 minutes and 28 seconds. Virginia, it's something else, right? I got to ask you about. So
Sure.
my wife is in school. Well, not in school. She actually got a master's degree now, but she's a social worker.
Yeah.
But so one day as a Christmas gift, right? And I think I'm a cool husband, but I brought her the DSM, right? Like as a Christmas gift so she could study. I was like, what do you really need the most? She was like, I need the DSM to study. So I bought it for her. You brought up the DSM, you brought up the 5 in your book, the DSM-5, and it kind of changed, the way that I move around. So, somebody will say something to me and I'm like, well, is it in the DSM? It's like, oh yeah. It's like, what DSM is it in? Is it in 5? if it's not in the 5.
Hey, after I read the book, I'm telling you, 5. If it ain't 5, don't even talk.
Not 5, man. You might have to go back. Man.
And now it's the 5TR. So Tango Romeo stands for text revision that just came out a couple months ago. But the definition, so PTSD didn't change with the newest version. So still the 5, the 5.
Okay.
So important, especially for military folks. I don't know about you, but I love me some regulations. I do. I geek out on regulations. I love knowing my right and left limit. I like being able to see it in print and know that it's there. And the DSM number 5 gives us a definition. It defines what PTSD is. It gives us all the criteria. What is it that you need to, what are the blocks that you need to check in order to no shit be diagnosed with PTSD? And I think that's so important. And the reason why we're kind of harping on the 5 is the DSM from the 4 to the 5, it changed significantly. The definition of trauma and the criteria for PTSD. So what will happen a lot of times is sailors who maybe went to mental health before 2013, early in the war cycle, they went to mental health and they were told, yeah, you don't have PTSD. You don't meet the definition. F you. See you later. Or worse, maybe they were told they had an adjustment disorder, which is something we see, pretty often in those older files, which just, that's just a feeling herder. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
an
you
adjustment
can't
disorder.
handle.
Like I just don't get along with people. Like it hurts my feelings and makes me feel sad on the inside. Really? No, no. So it changed a lot. And so it's very important, I think, for sailors to know that if you were diagnosed or more likely not diagnosed before 2013, I'm going to encourage you to give that another go.
Mhm.
And I love that the DSM comes right out and says what trauma is. It defines trauma in the DSM. And that goes back to that rumor that, hey, if it's not combat, then it's not real. It's like, ooh, no,
Yeah.
that's not a thing. That's not a thing. So the DSM defines trauma as actual or threatened exposure to death, serious injury, or sexual violence. I say again, actual or threatened exposure to death, serious injury, sexual violence. Friends, that is a large umbrella.
Yeah, that's
That is a
big.
large
Actual,
umbrella.
yeah, actual or threat.
Actual
Yeah,
or
Yeah.
threatened.
big.
Let's talk about that for a minute. So, a lot of your young folks, maybe they did spend a lot of time on the fob. Using I know a lot of your guys don't go on convoys. It's probably the best example I can come up with, but maybe we'll talk about your drone operators or something to put it more in a more naval context. But I think about convoys all the time. So standard 5-vehicle convoy. You go outside the wire of your forward operating base, and you're a smart cookie. You listen to your S2. You're listening to your 2-shop. You know that convoys get blown up all the time, that IEDs are a thing, that you could get shot, maimed, or kill. But by the grace of God, that never happens to you.
Mm-hmm.
You come back, you got your legs, good on you. And so one thing that I hear is, well, I can't have PTSD, Virginia, because I've still got my legs. At least I came home in one piece. It's like, whoa, let's talk
Yeah,
about that for a minute. So every time that we leave the wire, our body and our brains react because we know that there is threatened exposure to death and serious injury. Threatened
yeah,
exposure. This could happen. You get in, you're going, through, you get incoming fire and the drill goes off. Small arms fire, rocket fire. Well, thank God it didn't hit me. Well, guess what? You still puckered like a mother trucker when you heard the siren go off and you went into the bunker. Your
mm-hmm.
your body and your brain reacts. Thank God our bodies and brain react to threats. And a lot of things, it's miraculous. It's miraculous. A lot of things start happening. So our eyes, our heart starts to beat faster to get all the blood to our muscles so that we can get into that, what we call fight, flight, or freeze, which takes a tremendous amount of energy. Our eyes will actually dilate, so we're focused in. Our frontal lobes, for the part of that processing. This ain't Disney. You're going out on a convoy, so memory. Just kind of this.
Yeah,
You don't need your critical thought. This is why we forget. A lot of times, people will not remember large parts of their deployment, will not remember large parts of their trauma, because your brain was in no shit fight, flight, freeze, and it was doing what it needed to do to keep you alive. And it worked because you're here, we're talking. Awesome.
mm-hmm.
But every time you leave the wire in this convoy example, your brain goes into fight, flight, freeze mode, whether you get schwacked or not. Whether you get schwacked or not. So then we come home and we're going through the entrance control point on base, and all of a sudden we realize we're boxed in. Ooh,
Yeah,
and so boom, of course that's going to cause a flashback. Of course that's going to cause us some agita. That is going to freak us the fuck out because our brain is doing its job. It is doing what it takes to keep us alive. So thank God we didn't get hit. Thank God we did come home. But actual or threatened exposure, being threatened by a chain of command, being hazed, really violent hazing, which in a lot of cases we call sexual assault now.
Mhm.
Oh, it was just hilarious. He was just teabagging him. No, we call that sexual assault now. We've got a new term for that.
Yeah.
Not hilarious, very traumatic. And, being threatened to be raped, my God, these are things that are happening a lot. We have a lot of young sailors now. When I was working in that inpatient facility, I was telling you about my first gig. I think one of the things that shocked me the most, there was a major training facility within stone's throw of where I was working, and some of the trainees would say, I'm going to commit suicide. I want to get out. I'm done, and not realizing that they were going to, be drummed out of the military and go home, which was unfortunate. But a lot of them, when I was talking with them, and we have to remember that folks our age, I mean, your son is a sailor, so we have to remember that, a lot of these younger sailors coming in, they were trafficked during the opioid epidemic. I mean, I don't know about your community. I mean, a lot of communities, we had the advantage of being in the military, but a lot of folks who stayed back home in their small communities were ravaged by the opioid epidemic. So we're seeing these young people come in with a lot of trauma, a lot of untreated trauma. Damo, you were talking about the interview that you did for grad school. So, boy, we are seeing stuff now that is not combat, but is really affecting the fleet. It's really affecting our sailors. And it's so important how we react and how we talk about this. And are we shrouding this in shame? Or are we having a no shit real conversation?
Yeah, and that's a big point you bring up about the shame. Are we shrouding it in shame? Because a lot of people, they stand on a lot of pride. I say ego. I say the word ego as well, but sometimes ego could kind of be built by you. But a lot of people stand on that pride, and they just don't want to talk. They don't want to, or they don't feel like you care. That's another big thing. They don't feel like you care because there's so many of us that pry for the sake of prying, to go back and talk about it or something. Because you even talked about it, and we'll talk about it a little later. But when you was like, it's no secrets, it's no secrets at the command, and it's really not. You think you trust somebody, so that kind of closes these sellers up as well. But I have another question for you.
Hit me.
Is if somebody comes and says, hey, I have PTSD, or I don't have PTSD, and I'm like, well, how do you know? And they like, well, senior, I took the test. I took the PTSD test. Yeah. What should I be thinking about that? How should I be responding to that?
When somebody comes and tells us something that's really uncomfortable, it can make first of all, we need to get real. Especially if we're not. I mean, if they come to me, I'm a trained mental health professional. This is my gig. I know what to do. But if they go to the chaplain, they come to their NCO, they come to their chief, it's like, ooh, maybe we don't know exactly what to do with that. And so I think our first response is, whenever there's an elephant in the room, I think it's wise to name it. And maybe the feeling that we're having in that moment, and this is vulnerability. This is hard. This is hard. So let's not pretend that this is an easy thing, straight up, but just to say, wow, I'm not really sure what that means, a PTSD test. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm glad that you told me, and I'm glad that you're talking to me, and I'm glad that you trust me, and we're going to figure this out together.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, if I had a nickel, gentlemen, for every time I heard somebody say, well, I scored high on the PTSD test, it's like, oh gosh, no.
Test.
Yeah. But you know what? Also, there are a lot of PTSD tests given out at military treatment facilities and VA facilities.
Yeah.
So that might be where they got this PTSD test. I mean, this isn't a Cosmo quiz. They might have gotten this from a legitimate or a licensed mental health professional, which is tough. And in order to get a PTSD diagnosis, a lot of stars have to align. And we need to be honest about that. First of all, it requires a really authentic conversation on the part of our sailor. And that's not easy. There are cultural reasons, there's gender reasons, there's generational reasons, there is a power dynamic when we're talking to a chief, when we're talking to a medical professional. There's a power mismatch there. It is a very vulnerable, very frightening place to be. And we are expecting our sailors to share their deepest, darkest, maybe they haven't even told Jesus, they haven't told their spouse or their dog, anybody. And we're asking them to now talk to a commander or, a colonel, mental health. That is really terrifying. So there has to be that authenticity there. There also has to be a receiver, somebody who's receiving that, who knows what PTSD is. And I mean, Virginia, we all know that women don't serve in combat. That was the no shit response I got.
That's sick.
That is sick. That is sick. But we have to remember that's a response that a lot of our sailors are getting. And it's not okay. It is not okay. And that's a big reason I wrote the Soldier's Guide, PTSD, is to empower. If you know what it is and what it's not, then when somebody goes, well, you know what, I don't think I believe you. You can be like, I got my book, like stop it. Yeah. But, there has to be someone on the receiving end who knows their DSM-5 or their DSM-5, TR, Tango Romeo, and knows trauma and is willing to be in receive mode. We need to be honest about this. Not every, this is going to be a feeling herder. You're going to get emails. So not every mental health professional is great at their job.
Yeah.
Not
facts.
Yeah, it's a job.
It's a job.
Skill level. You get skill levels there. So
not every chief's a great chief. Not every chief cares. Sorry, Damo, please go ahead.
Yeah,
you guys care?
Let me jump in. Yeah. Oh yeah. Let me jump in real quick. So, if you guys didn't see how Virginia answered Damo's question earlier, just think back when you get this book and you read it. She got some great examples in there on how to handle certain situations. So make sure you guys get that book. Make sure you guys read it. But Virginia, I'm a big fan of like not knowing everything, and I explain it and I talk about that all the time. I don't try to know everything, right? But what I like to do is, point people in the right direction, right? And that's why I think your book helped me out, like, because you got the symptoms in there, like, the flashback, hallucinations, shame, self-destruction behavior. That's a big thing right there. You talked about avoidance earlier. So things like that is what educated me, so I can point them in the right direction. So, like I said before, that's type of stuff is in the book. But man, like as a leader though, knowing those things right there and getting sailors or soldiers or whoever pointing in the right direction is a big deal.
Yeah, where it really helped me? It helped me in understanding flashbacks and hallucinations. I know you just brought that up, Damon, because I always saw flashbacks and hallucinations on TV, right? Movies. And it's like, I went to school for film. So, I'm looking at like, it's wonderfully shot, it might be a haze. And but the way you broke it down, first of all, it was scary as shit. This scariest thing in the book is I never felt like, it's been a while. I read a lot of books, but this was the first time I'm like, no shit, like this is scary. Like I never went through it, and after reading a book, it's like I do not ever want to go through it. That was rough.
Wow.
Most definitely. And then the biggest thing is always, right, do you want change? That I feel that every time you say it, I hear it, I read it, like, do you want change? And that's big right there. That's huge.
Yeah.
It's a feeling herder. It's hard.
Mhm.
We can, first of all, thank you. Thank you, Damo. And I do want to circle back to hallucinations because you're right. They're
Mhm.
scary as fuck.
Yeah.
They're scary as
Mhm.
fuck. And, I think when it comes, so to break down the big two, because that is, and this is something that I, no kidding, use every day in my practice. So when a new person comes into my office and they sit down on my couch, that's the first thing I want to know. Do you believe change is possible? Do you want to change? Because if you don't believe change is possible, if you don't think that it's possible for you, you're absolutely right.
Right. Yep.
You're absolutely correct. So I'm not sure if I use this example in the book, but it's one I'm thinking about a lot lately, because it's after pandemic, and pandemic hasn't been really nice to a lot of us. So I think about weight loss. Do you believe it's possible that you could change your diet and get to, increase your exercise, change your diet, look at your macros, write down what you're eating? Do you think that it's possible that you could change your lifestyle to the point where, where you could lose weight and be within regs? Do you think that's possible? And a lot of people would be like, Virginia, anything's possible. I could wake up tomorrow, the grass could be blue and the sky could be green. Anything is possible. And then we have to say, yeah, is it possible for you? Do you believe that that is possible for you? And then, and I'll just tell them myself, that's when I'm like, oh, you know what? But I'm going through so much stress right now. Like, we just ended the semester, and it's just a donut. It's like, oh, then we're digging in. We're digging in. So when it comes to PTSD, when it comes to, and this sucks. This sucks. And especially those of us who have loved ones who are struggling with mental health disorders, or have kids, and especially adult children. This is hard. This is not a question that we can ask and answer for them. So a lot of calls that I get to my office are from moms and dads. They're like, listen, my sailor just went through some shit and she is having a hard time. Can you talk to her? And I have to
Mhm.
very lovingly tell them, no, because just because you see that change is possible and you know that they can change, this is something that, I'm an expert in psychology, but they're the expert in them. And that when it comes to the big two, that's actually a lot more important. Do we believe change is possible? Do I believe it's possible that I could get to a point where I can go to my kid's baseball game and not have a panic attack? Not am I ready to do that? Not do I believe that's possible for me? Do I believe it's possible that I could get my drinking under control so that I can
Mhm.
actually work on my trauma without being wasted? Do I believe it's possible? Just do I think it's possible that change could happen? Do I believe that's possible for me? And whether I believe it is or whether I believe it isn't, I am absolutely right. And this hurts. This hurts when we have folks in our unit, folks in our ship, folks in our family that we love, because we know that that's possible for them. But we didn't start it. We can't control it. We can't cure it. That we didn't create that. That is their journey. Then we get to the
Mhm.
second part. Do I believe change is possible? Do I want to change? Because this is asking for a big commitment. Are you willing to do, no shit, every single thing that the therapist tells you? Are you willing to show up to your appointments, to do the shit ton of therapeutic homework it's going to take? Are you willing to go to an inpatient facility if that's what's needed? Are you willing to talk to your chief and get some accommodations? Are you willing to do whatever it takes to get better? Because this shit ain't easy. It's a lot. But it's also not forever. It is not forever. And so there are a lot of folks who come across the big two and come across the book, or they listen, to the audiobook, and they're like, you know what? No, I don't, if we're just being for real, I don't know if change is possible. I don't know if I want to change. I don't know if I can change. This is terrifying. Something is happening to me and I don't know. And that is totally okay. It is okay to be on the fence about the big two. What I would ask those clients is it possible that you're wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible? Have you ever done anything in your life before that you thought was absolutely impossible and you came through it? Have you ever survived yourself? Have you ever survived a really rocky family of origin? Have you ever, is it possible that you are wrong? Because if it's possible that you're wrong, and especially when it comes to suicide, we need to get very real about talking about suicide. The likelihood that somebody struggling with PTSD has not very seriously thought about suicide is so unbelievably small. We need to stop talking like, do you want to hurt yourself or someone else? Because that's what they tell me to ask. Make the assumption that they have thought about it. But is it possible that you're wrong? Because if it's possible that you're wrong, that it's possible that shwacking yourself is not the right decision. It is possible that there is change out there. It is possible. If you followed the yellow footsteps, through boot camp, if you pulled off a mission, if something turned out the way that you didn't expect, is it possible that you're wrong? Just, when it comes to, but do we believe it's possible? Do we want to change? Are we willing to do what it takes? And are we willing to do what it takes? And those aren't easy. PTSD treatment, that is not a cakewalk, but it's not forever. It's not forever. Evidence-based treatments for PTSD, 10 to 15 sessions. That means that if we're seeing a mental health therapist who specializes in PTSD, because you should get a specialist, don't get a generalist, but somebody who no kidding specializes in PTSD. After about 10 to 15 sessions with them, so if you're going every week, maybe 2 to 3 months, what the data tell us, and the data are very clear, is that most people will have a significant reduction in their symptoms and be able to resume to their walking, talking, everyday life. Most people, most of the time. Now, we talked about kind of those outliers. We talked about that 80-20 rule. If you're in that 20%, does that mean you're like a football bat? No, you're not all fucked up. Is it possible that we could try something else? Is it possible that maybe we have to put down the bottle for a minute? Is it possible that maybe we have to look at something else? If we're working with a no kidding specialist and the folks who surround us, because a big part of the book that we talk about is having that social support, surrounding ourselves with people who love us and care about us, and how to make that social support if it doesn't exist. Can we do that? Can we surround ourselves having NCOs, having chiefs who know the data, who know this information, really care? Oh my gosh. I think about like my own life. I was just talking with someone about this week. What it would have been like for me personally, if when I was growing up, I had someone in my life who was going through it, who was having a hard time with stress or alcohol or whatever. And that instead of the way they dealt with it, if they went and they got help, Maybe they went to a doctor. Maybe they talked to their chief. Maybe they, went to a therapist. How different my life would have been growing up. If I had seen somebody handle their shit well, instead of, in my case, just kind of jumping into a bottle, and how different my life would have been. And that's the opportunity that chiefs have. That's the
Yeah.
opportunity that NCOs have to be that example.
Yeah, and break the cycle.
Oh,
Break some of those cycles.
Yeah.
I know a lot of our chiefs had issues.
mhm.
I had, some of my senior chiefs. I talked about it on one of my podcast episodes about a senior chief I had who we clashed. Always, me and him got into it. And then at some point I realized that, not even some point, years later, I found out that he was struggling with alcoholism the whole time. So whatever whatever it was from him that could have influenced me to kind of be like, all right, well, this is the way senior chiefs are, this is the way. And that's why a lot of times, NCOs and some branches, chiefs, senior chiefs, they get a really bad rap because a lot of us are just reenacting like our experience that we had from before. One of the things you talked about as well, my mom talked to me about just, she always worked in like the drug and alcohol recovery field. And she said, like, your people not going to stop doing drugs until they want to stop doing drugs. Your family member could bring you to the drug, facility, your care facility as much as they want. But until you make a decision like, hey, I don't want to do this drug anymore, you're going, it's a thing until it's not. Another thing that you brought up was if you don't think you can, you won't. You know what I'm saying? And that's a big deal. And that's something that I've been kind of subscribed to for a while. Anyway, even with, sailors, like, yo, if you're in a rough situation and you don't think that this rough situation could change, it'll never change because of the amount of control that you have. Like, you have more control than in this situation. One of the things that you brought up, so we had a guest on our podcast recently who was a survivor from the USS
That's
Cole.
cool. I saw that. Amazing.
Yeah, and he struggled with PTSD, and one of the things, and still, I didn't fully understand it, until I listened to your book, because I had already listened to the book, but I listened to the book again after that, and then I listened to some other stuff, and I got some more knowledge about it. But one of the things you brought up in your book that I don't hear that much is freeze, right? So I always hear fight, always hear flight. But even him, he talked about, he said it. He was like, I froze, for a second. I didn't know what, and as obvious as freeze should be as an option, never really thought about it. Fight and flight are both actions. Freezing is like inaction. Like, I'm not doing anything. And I think about that because I think about the way the brain, you brought it up in the book, but it's like, the way I translated it was like, I translated like your brain works like before the moment, so I'm always like, yeah, if that was me, I would this or that, when I see him, you know what I'm saying? Like Scrappy Doo, you always saw Scooby Doo and Scrappy, I don't see him. But so it's like your brain, I just realized that aged me like crazy, but it's cool. So you think about what you're going to do before the moment, right? And then what you would have done after the moment, like post the moment. But you really don't know how you will respond inside of the moment until it happens. And I think that's where I got that's what I took from you speaking about that freeze aspect.
And we don't get a choice. We don't get a choice. The military does a great job of trying to train the freeze out of us. That's why you're always, it's why you're doing drill after drill after drill on a ship to train the freeze out of you, to get that muscle memory in there. It's why we do live fire exercises. That's why you drill over and over and over again. The whole point of that is so that, when something happens, you don't freeze. But we don't get a choice. We don't get a choice. The brain, our brain will take over, because our brain's number one job is to keep us alive. And let's face it, there's no outrunning a bullet. There's no outrunning a childhood abuser. There is no outrunning. Freeze is a very logical response to, in a lot of cases, in movement and fire exercise, it's like, I'm up, they see me, I'm down. I'm up, they see me, I'm down. The eye sees what is moving. And so freezing makes a lot of sense from a neurobiological standpoint, because, if you think about like those, I love those TV shows like Wild Kingdom, where you see like the lions, chasing gazelle snacks and whatnot.
I watched that. Yeah,
I love that. Because you'll see one gazelle, just right next to the lion standing stock still. And that takes a ton of energy. And then you see the other one farther off, and it takes off. And guess which one becomes the gazelle snack? The one that ran, because the eye sees what is moving. I mean, if you've ever, seen like a mouse in a restaurant, or, any, I'm up, they see me, I'm down. Okay. So our brain doesn't give us a choice. It will freeze. And a lot, especially, I hear this a lot with rape survivors, sexual assault survivors. I froze. And then there's a lot of guilt and shame that comes with that. Well, because I froze, I deserved what happened to me. Because I didn't fight back. Because I fill in the blank. And it's like, honey, you did not get a choice. You didn't get a choice. And I hope that frees somebody right now will give somebody some freedom right now. If that is a stuck point that you've been thinking to yourself for, in some cases, decades, our brain, we don't get a choice. We don't get a choice. Our brain is going to do whatever it takes to keep us alive, which brings us back to hallucinations, like we were talking about before. They're terrifying. But PTSD is it's very, very logical. And this is why I really love the idea of giving sailors resources. It is a very logical reaction to a very abnormal set of circumstances. So PTSD is not something wrong with you. It's something that happens to you. Something happens, your brain and body reacts to keep you alive. So within the context of PTSD, and this goes under those re-experiencing symptoms, those intrusive symptoms, criterion Bravo B, our brain is going to do whatever it takes to keep us alive. So it makes a lot of sense that our brain, we come back home and we're living our walking, talking everyday life. And then all of a sudden, maybe we smell something burning when we know that there's nothing there. We taste moon dust and we're at home. We hear somebody yelling our name. We hear the sound of a gunshot. Our brain will manufacture hallucinations. And this is when we see, hear, taste, touch, smell things that we ostensibly know are not there. We know it's not there. But our brain will manufacture this because we need to stay alert, stay alive. Remember, our brain's number one job, keep us alive. Number two job, to make meaning. But that is a far cry from number one. So this is your brain's survival mode. Your brain will manufacture all sorts of hallucinations, all sorts of things, nightmares, flashbacks, dissociation. So dissociative episodes. Dissociation is a 50-cent word that means disconnected. And this happens a lot with PTSD. You'll be talking with someone, and then all of a sudden you'll realize, wow, they're not listening to me. They're out to lunch. Or, we see this a lot with driving. I'm in South Texas where the highways are long. And so, you've got maybe the radio on, or the white noise of the engine, just the hum of the engine. And all of a sudden we are someplace else, and it's like, oh shit, my exit was 2-3 exits ago. I have a long way to go back. We dissociate. We disconnect from what is happening. And that's part of your brain's survival method. And it is a symptom of PTSD. It's in the DSM. What that means is that this is a normal and expected part of PTSD symptoms. When I say it's normal, that doesn't mean it tickles, sucks, but we expect it. We expect hallucinations. For me personally, I have never seen a case of PTSD without hallucinations, ever. However, we watch great movies and we know that if I'm hallucinating, that it's a skip, hop, skip, and a jump away to wearing the tinfoil hat. It's like, oh shit. I hear this wonderful expression a lot here in South Texas, like, hide that in your heart, honey. Like, you don't need to be telling anybody about that. Just hide that one in your heart, because that is a great way to get in a padded room or get on antipsychotic medicine. But hallucinations, it's a normal part of PTSD. And it's scary. But it can be treated. It absolutely can be treated. It is not a forever thing. It is your brain's way of trying to keep you alive. It's a very healthy brain response.
Yeah. And
I want.
What's up, Damon?
Yes, I want to bring up, because you, Virginia, you and Damo just bring up a good point. It just made me think for a second, when you guys talking about Frozen, right? And my mind started turning like think about the TV shows you watch, and you watching these crime shows, and you going and they talking to them about a crime, and first thing they talking about, I froze, right? So that is just so on point when we talking about anything. You can be reading a book, papers, whatever, when it comes to trauma or anything, a victim or whatever, it'd be like, man, I just froze. You blinked out and I didn't know what was going on and all this type of stuff. So when you guys talk about that stuff, man, it just triggers me man, you know what? I never thought about it like that, but now since you guys bring it up, now since I read it in a book, now it makes sense. You know what I mean? So that goes back to the education piece. I'm learning so much every time, we get in these conversations, start talking about this stuff. So it's good stuff.
Yeah. Virginia, I got a thought. I'm thinking about something you spoke about in the book. And it was about something as simple as going to the commissary, not being simple anymore, and I don't have PTSD, but things like that ground it for me. It's damn, the commissary, I can't go get, my grandmama biscuits. My grandmama make the biscuits that you pop. And I love these, these pressurized cans. I love them. I go and I pop them and they, but just dealing. So that part, it grounded me, and that stood out. So it's the things like that that really stood out too in the book. Damn. And that was your personal story, wasn't it?
It was. So it is what it is. I'm not going to be ashamed of it because it's my truth. So I was around too many things that went boom. And when I was a kid, on deployments, and when I was a kid, I was always terrified of pressurized dough. So those, the muffins, the biscuits, because there was just something really unexpected about that. It was just something that was like pop. I was like, that's not
at some
okay.
Point, yeah.
And not that any pressurized dough is going to kill me, but the brain works in really mysterious ways, and so I got it in my head, and I just, with PTSD, one of my symptoms was that these very intrusive thoughts. So these intrusion symptoms, this criterion B, bravo, these intrusion symptoms, if you think about it like an intruder breaks into your house when you're not ready for it, and just takes all your shit, and your brain is in a bad neighborhood. This is happening all the time. So these intrusive thoughts, and even if it was something really small, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I would obsess about it. And one of the things I really got stuck on was pressurized dough. And I just developed this really abnormal, I was like, this is just, no. So I stopped So at first, and I didn't know it till here I am just jamming out in the commissary in Mannheim, Germany. And I was like, holy shit, there's all this pressurized dough. And I froze. I have seen a lot more dangerous things than pressurized dough, but there was nothing more terrifying to me in that moment. And so, I backed out, and somebody even approached me. I remember they're like, ma'am, are you okay? And I'm like, oh yeah, we're cool. No, like hard no. And then all of a sudden I stopped. And the more I thought about it, the more obsessed I got about it because of that avoidance, that criterion Charlie. Mm-hmm. And so then I stopped actually buying dairy. I stopped going into the dairy section. I started buying, we have Parmalat in Europe. And my husband was like, what's up with this? I was like, it's good for you. He's like, all right, whatever. And I'm married to an awesome human being. I'm like, it's good for you. Just drink it. He's amazing. And, but then, every time eventually I just got to the point where I couldn't even go to the commissary. And it wasn't the fear of the pressurized dough. It was starting to trigger a panic attack. I would pull into the commissary parking lot. My heart would start beating. I'd start sweating, my eyes dilating. All the blood is rushing to my muscles. I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm going crazy. Like whatever is happening here, I am not okay. I am not okay. Yeah. And this was before we could, place orders, for curbside pickup. So it was, it was tough. But yeah, that was my story. The brain is nothing short of a miracle. The brain is absolutely miraculous in what it will do to try to protect us, whether it makes sense or not.
Mm-hmm. So I've seen in like the recent time, I'm thinking about last year around this time, like the wait times for a seller, and I hate it. I'm, as an electrician, when people come get electrical tools, we do the service, right? And we got hours, right? Damon know that. We got hours. It can only come between 1,300 and 1,400. However, we get somebody at 14:30 and they come and we give them the tools normally, right? Or they try to go get their chief or something, try strong arm me. That ain't happening, guys. But we normally just give them their tools, right? But we get a seller that, is going through something. Let's say it's mental health related. They might think they have PTSD. They got some of the symptoms. They go to medical. And then it's like, I'm like, what happened? It's like, oh yeah, they told me I'm on like a wait list. I got like 3 months until they're going to actually, come see me or something like that. And it was a lot of that, around, hey, Damon, am I right? It was a lot of that around last year, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, hey, go stay in the barracks room, hang up. Like, it was almost like, do you want to be off the ship? Like, is that what you're coming here for? Yeah, like, are you coming just because you don't want to be on a ship? And the seller's like, no, like, I'm actually going through something, So I just want to know, like, how does hearing about like those long wait times and just the whole politics of just trying to get, like service on like your most vital part of your body, which is your brain, the most vital muscle in your body. How does it feel, knowing that this is something you specialize in and knowing that people got to wait around for this treatment?
That pisses me off.
Yeah.
It makes me angry because I find it hard to believe that if you went to the commander of that unit and said, I just had a sailor come in who said he was feeling suicidal and really wants to talk about his trauma, and he was sent away, told to come back in 3 months, and here's his appointment. Mm-hmm. I find it very hard to believe that commander would be like, oh yeah, that's just how it rolls around here.
Yeah.
But, this happens. I very seldom hear about this happening with an officer or a senior NCO, by the way. I've never had, a field grade officer say, oh yeah, I went to mental health and they told me to come back in 3 months. But this happens to junior enlisted a lot.
Yeah.
And disproportionately, it happens to sailors of color. And that's not me trying to be #mean lady. That's the data. And that's not okay. That is not okay. It's this idea of, advocacy, because if I send an officer away, Or if I say, yeah, I hear you're really suicidal, come back in 3 months. Yeah, no. They're going to go straight to the command. But if I have, an E1, E2, E3 struggling, I'm going to blow them off. I find it so hard. I find it unfathomable that a command would be like, oh, yeah, that's just how it's going. And especially with our current mental health crisis. You guys talked about it in your show on, folks going AWOL, your debate about desertion, about these mental health weights. And it's like, most of the Navy is enlisted. Most of the Navy is under 25. These are our sailors. And, thank God that your sailors have you as advocates. I would find it very hard to believe that if you went to another chief in that command and said, hey, I got someone who's struggling, that they wouldn't all of a sudden find a slot for them. That's just where I sit.
Yeah. And then I know we moving toward a lot of mobile mental health resources, whether it be via telephone or internet, some stuff like that, right? And is that stuff, are those things working for people?
The data are clear. They do. So especially when it works with PTSD care. So up at Strong Star, so the DoD Center of Excellence in San Antonio, UT Health Science Center, Center for Excellence for PTSD Research, they have done a lot of studies on the efficacy of cognitive processing therapy. So that's one of those evidence-based treatments, and prolonged exposure through telehealth, through Zoom. And what they have found is that it works. So the data are very clear. And one thing I would say also, I work within a large mental health system in my day job. And so finding resources for folks who are struggling is a real passion of mine, because, I'm just one of those, folks who believes that everybody deserves excellent access to mental health. Folks at Strong Star, if you have any sailors who are seeking help, I would really recommend going to them. Send me an email. It would be my privilege to help someone get in the right direction. I have readers reach out to me all the time. They're like, I'm in Alaska, I'm in Norfolk, I'm in, Maine. Can you help me? Yeah, absolutely. I can help you find someone. When it comes to mental health, I'm sorry, I'm just, this chaps my ass so bad hearing about this. And I know you didn't mean to, but, we're asking sailors to help themselves when they're already in a deficit.
Yeah.
We can't know our judgment is impaired when our judgment is impaired. It's just ridiculous. There are resources available, great resources available. And maybe it's just another mental health clinic. For example, I'm close to San Antonio, Texas, where we have the Joint Base San Antonio, we have BAMC, and we have some sailors out there, but very small pockets. But then we also have the Air Force facility, Wilford Hall. And so sometimes I'll hear about like, oh, well, they're booked out 3 months ahead. But then if you just go 30 minutes south, you can get in tomorrow. And these are things that mental health professionals know, that, and folks, and why it's so awesome to have advocates, to have, really strong chiefs advocating for sailors. It's to say, hey, you know what, you just sent my sailor away. And you told them to come back in 3 months. I find that really hard to believe. What other resources are available? And I'd be willing to bet that they would say, you know what, let me check. Let me see what other facilities. Because having a 3-month wait for that's not a thing, especially if someone is in crisis. That's not okay.
I got another question for you. So, and this, I don't know if this is a good question or not, but
they're all good questions, sir.
Yeah. So I used to have hair, right? I don't have hair anymore, right? I'm bald. But when I walk into a barbershop, you know, and I go, if that first chair is like an older guy, you know, nobody in the seat, but it looked like he runs the shop, he's talking, he just gonna keep that seat forever. And then it's probably like a couple more chairs. And on the TV, they got ESPN on one channel. On another channel, they might have the news. Another channel, they might have like a Friday or next Friday on. And they got some real good music playing. The floor not swept as well as it's, you know, supposed to be. And they just talking about football, arguing about the latest stuff that's going on in music. I look around and I say, hey, I'm in the right place. You know, it got the right smell. You could smell whatever they use to clean the clippers and stuff. I'm in the right place. This is where I need to be. Let's say that let's say I read the book. I had the conversation with my wife. I had the conversation with my kid. I believe that I do have PTSD, and I know that I need to get some help. How do I know that I'm in the right place?
I think you'll get that sense.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to talking about trauma, there needs to be a rapport. There needs to be a trust between you and your therapist, just like with you and your barber. You need to feel that they are listening to you, that they are picking up what you're putting down, that they care about what you're saying, and that they have the no shit expertise to help you get better. That this is a no kidding expert. And in the book, we talk about how to find a mental health therapist, because if you're already at a deficit, it is hard to call and pick up the phone. And it's like, well, what do I say? What is the script? What do I do? So we've got those scripts in the book for you. But, you can ask those questions. You do a little bit of vetting. You'd say something as simple as, I had a really bad experience involving an assault on my last ship. And I'm worried that I'm not handling it very well, and I'm afraid I might have PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
What resources do you have to help someone like me? And then listen.
Mm-hmm.
Listen. And hopefully they're going to tell you, you know what? I'm glad you came here. I'm going to listen to you. I've been trained in this. I've been trained, I have these, I have the specialized training in trauma. I have worked with military populations. I speak Navy. I speak fluent Navy. I can pick up what you're putting down here. And I'm here to listen. These are the ways that I can help. It's like landing on a new planet, and your therapist is your tour guide. It's to say, okay, this is a scary place. I know you've never been here, but don't worry. I've got the map. I have literally led hundreds of other people through this terrain, and I got you. I got you. And this is how I'm going to take you through. And it is that feeling. It is that feeling of, all right, I'm in the right place.
Yeah.
And if you're not in the right place, it is really hard to be able to advocate for ourselves and say, you know what? This just isn't working. I mean, I'm a therapist, so I hear a lot of therapy horror stories. I went to a therapist and I learned more about their marriage, their bad marriage, than I did to talk about my PTSD. Or, and I've heard this a few times that, I went and then they asked the same question twice. Or I even heard of one person, they fell asleep. And it's like, damn, you deserve better.
Yeah.
Because our recovery's on the line. This isn't, this isn't changing a fucking tire.
Mm-hmm.
This is your life. This is reclaiming your life. I'll speak personally. The things that were affected with my PTSD, I tried to blow up my marriage. I started getting in fights with the people I love. I couldn't concentrate. I was I wouldn't know. I don't know if I was a functioning alcoholic. For sure an alcoholic. I was not okay. I was destructive, self-destructive. I mean, I was just blowing things up left, right, and sideways. Your life is on the line. PTSD will kill you.
I got a question.
Sure.
Did you destroy any relationships at that time that you weren't able to recover?
I did. I lost and it's, you know what? And I own it.
Yeah.
And I'm in the process of making better amends. You know, I made a big mistake with a very dear friend, a friend who I've had since childhood. And I did everything wrong. Everything wrong. I got up in my ego. I thought I knew better. And I criticized her marriage very unfairly. I mean, I was a total shitbag. Absolutely no excuse. No excuse. I had been drinking, you know, the brunch that starts in single digit time, you know, so I think I started drinking at like 8. Oh yeah. And even looking back on that now, I'm embarrassed to admit, I don't even remember what all I said, but I know that it was hurtful because I remember that was my intent. And that was shitty. It was so shitty. And that relationship has never been the same. And I really deeply, deeply regret that. And I don't live close to home anymore from where I grew up. And our lives are very, very different. Yet it's funny you should bring that up because I was thinking about that just very recently in the last couple months, that is one of those relationships that I blew to smithereens, that I need. Not only do I need to make amends for it, but I want to, because she really deserved a better friend and a better person. And I was very sick, and that is no excuse for my behavior. I own it. I don't make any excuses for it. And I need her to know that will never, ever happen again. And it's really her choice. And if she's like, you know what, thanks, but fuck you anyway, man, would I honor that? Because you guys don't know that type of asshole I can be, but I sure do. And, I don't deserve to get shit. If I got what I deserved, I'd be really screwed. But I certainly, I really regret that.
Yeah. And then you talked about the marriage. And before I even ask any questions, I got to give a special shout out to your husband for holding it down. Like, he held it down as he, and I know it was hard, but he held it down as he should have. That's a special thing to do, man, for us guys, man. So some points for us, and it's good stuff. But I know that, because as much as it's something that you're dealing with, it now spews into something that everybody else is dealing with as well,
Yeah, I really hurt my family. I'm very, very close with my family. Love my family. And I was very hurtful. I was, really, and I did a lot wrong. I did a lot wrong with my marriage, and I really tried hard to blow my marriage up.
Yeah.
I did everything but file. I was just not okay. None of my behavior was okay. Yeah. None of it. And once I recovered and I had a little distance from that, I went back and I looked at the fucking wreckage. And there is this incredible man who is still, I don't know how he puts up with my shit. He's still active duty too. And he's an incredible man. And I don't know, it's nothing short of a miracle. I don't know how our marriage survived it. I don't know how I survived myself. I'm profoundly thankful. And, it's not perfect every day what marriage is, but how thankful I am that, that I was able to just, own it and not make any excuses and work to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
So that's really all we can do. And we're all going to make mistakes. But, what separates the men from the boys is, do we own it? The 3 parts, whenever I teach about making apologies, I always, talk about the science behind it. There are 3 parts to a successful apology. You own it, make no excuses, and ensure that it never happens again.
Mm-hmm.
And, you always tell sailors when if they go to captain's mast or something like some sort of NJP or get in trouble, it's like, hey, just own it. Don't make any excuses and make sure it doesn't happen again. And that's hard. That is hard because there's all the yeah buts. Yeah, but I had PTSD. Yeah, but I was drinking a lot at the time. Yeah, but I was really sick. It's like, no, there is no excuse. Yeah, buts are hard. Yeah, coming through PTSD, getting treatment and getting better, it gets us back to level playing field so that we can unfuck everything that we fucked up. It gives us a chance. It's not easy. This journey is not easy, but it is so worth it.
Yeah. You talked about.
I bet it's a relief too, though. It's a relief when you talk about it and you just destroyed a lot of shit. But then when you go back and you talk about it and you try to amend, right? It's that listen piece too, though, because you were running and you doing this and you doing that. But when it's time and you say your piece and you think it's like, okay, I just said this, I got this out in the opener. But then once you listen back, and that's when you really realize, like, man, I really fucked some shit up, but you really don't really get it until you look in their eyes and that listen piece, it really gets you.
Yeah. We talk about that with the scripts about how to talk to our family members about PTSD. And that's tough to write, and it's tough to read, and it's tough to hear, and it's tough to do. The most important thing is that listen piece. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, you said shut the fuck up, right? I think that's what it was in the book.
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Because our PTSD, our drinking, our behavior, you could have like 20 kids, God forbid. You could have 5 or 6 kids, and it will affect each one of them in a very different way. And it's all okay. It could affect, my mom one way, my other mom another way. It could affect, my sibling this way and another sibling a different way. It's going to affect people in different ways. But we need to have the courage to start that conversation and really have the courage to listen and own it and digest it, because it's part of everyone's healing. It's tough. It's worth it. But you don't have to do it alone. We got scripts. They work. They literally have worked with hundreds of soldiers and sailors. Hundreds. We've got good science. If you're not cheating, you're not trying. We've got good data. We've got good research. Let's do what works and go by the numbers. And, with our scripts in the Soldier's Guide, we even say, listen, if you feel like you're not okay, write it down. Just read it, but introduce your elephant. And so we, it's, we, in the Soldier's Guide to PTSD, I think my number one goal is to take away all this mystery, take away all this gobbledygook of, medicalese, and just no shit. What do I do? What is this? What isn't it? And what do I do about it? What are my courses of action? How do I execute?
Yeah.
Because
you also took away some of the bullshit. Like, for instance, when you said, I was so happy to read this, but when you said everyone at work has some sort of idea about something anyway, you was talking about HIPAA laws and all that. It's like everybody already knows something. There's some type of water cooler conversation already happening. Why was she out of work? Where's she been at for the last 3 weeks? Where he been? Those things happen. We try to act like it's not happening, tight-lipped, and everybody's talking about it. So the best thing you could do, and you spoke about it, is control your narrative.
Control your narrative.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing you talked about in the book that affect the Pygmalion, I hope I'm saying it right. I think it's the Pygmalion effect, Robert Rosenthal. So when they went to the school and they tested the kids and they,
the Rosenthal effect. Yeah.
They talked to the teachers and they told the teachers these kids are going to be an advanced, group of kids or whatever.
Yeah.
Then the teachers tailored the way they taught to that changed. Like the first time I heard about that was from you. And then I went to Newport, Rhode Island, and they talked about it, right? They called it the Pygmalion effect, but it's the same Rosenthal. But it changed so much that I think about when I think about life and expectations. Because it changed some things I think about like just where people grow up, how they grow up, the schools they go to, like all types of things. And it even for me sometimes, when I go places and I might see somebody and it might dictate how my approach is. Like that unmotivated, like seller or something like that. I might tailor my wording a certain way. Then that motivated seller, I might say less. Like, hey, we need to go do this. The unmotivated seller, I might be like, we need to. This had to happen. This happened. But it's that same effect. It's expectations. And so that touched me. That hit me like hard.
Yeah, we can control the narrative. I think, we talk a lot about because like the one thing everyone wants to know is, okay, do I have PTSD? If I've got it, what do I do about it? And then what do I do after? How do I keep from relapsing? So relapse doesn't just happen with drugs and alcohol. Relapse can happen with anxiety, depression. It can happen with a bad elbow. That's when we go back to an earlier point. And relapse happens with PTSD. And so we have to talk about that social support. How do we talk to people that we love about our PTSD, the people who deserve our story? And then how do we talk to the people who we don't love about our PTSD? How do we talk to maybe that person in our chain of command who is not very supportive and thinks that I'm full of shit? How do I talk to HR if I'm on the civilian side? How do I talk to my boss who already thinks I'm a shitbag because, I've called out a ton of times? So yeah, we've got those scripts, but there is good science behind it. I think it's so important that we're looking at the science. So we look at the Pygmalion effect, Rosenthal effect is how I know it. We look at narrative therapy, aspects of narrative therapy, and how do we bring it together? We even look at literature, and it's like, how do we bring it together? Because we want people to root for us. We want people to root for us. We want people to be on our side. And we need to have friends. We need to have that support. If I had a nickel for every time I heard something like, you know what, I really want to get help for my PTSD, but I'm going to do it on my own. It's like, well, shit. Can we talk about that for a minute? Can we talk about doing it on your own? So if we could do it on our own, gentlemen, we already would have.
Yeah.
We already would have. But that is a fantasy. That is a fantasy right up there with like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to go back to being a casual, drinker, social drinker.
Yeah.
Well, you're not. That's a fantasy. Stop it. Stop it.
Like every night is social. I'm with my wife. I'm with my wife. It's a social event. We got Netflix on.
But if we could do it ourselves, we would have. We need others. That's what the data are very clear.
Yeah. I got some random kind of questions
Hit me.
For you.
Love it.
So first for the listeners, I do want y'all to know, I'm going to read a little bit off of this Amazon thing. So I do want y'all to know Virginia is a licensed professional counselor and national certified counselor specializing in military issues and combat-related trauma. She provides crisis intervention and evidence-based treatments for PTSD, moral injury. All right, I'm gonna stop right there for a second.
Yeah.
Moral injury, right? Let me finish this sentence.
Yeah.
Depression, combat, operational stress, and other diagnoses. Hey, Damon, keep moral injury like right there for me. Virginia is a certified clinician in cognitive processing therapy and prolonged exposure therapy and has 20 plus years experience serving active duty military veterans, military retirees, and family members. Certified group psychotherapist, active American group Psychotherapy Association member. Virginia is an Army Reserve officer, combat veteran, and published researcher. Has an amazing husband, Jay, and a terrible dog, Peanut.
Terrible.
I could go on and on about terrible dogs, right? But moral injury, right? Moral injury. It's funny because it was something I wanted to talk about, but then I kind of skipped past it. Moral injury is a trend. Like I feel like
really.
In the Navy, I feel like moral injury. I remember, and maybe I'm wrong, and you could kind of correct me on what moral injury is. But I remember, I think I talk about it. I think I talk about it on a podcast. But I walked into my first watch as an engineer, and I was like, and I came from boot camp. Well, I came from being a civilian. I had whatever my thoughts were about the military as a civilian.
Mm-hmm.
It's this great, honest place. Everything is done right in order. Then I went to boot camp. All boot camp does is reinforces that thought, right?
Yeah.
We make our racks like this, we do this. So then I get to my first ship and I go to my first watch, right? And so my expectation on my first watch is that this person is going to take me to every nook and cranny on the ship, show me everything, right? And I get with the guy and I'm like, so what do you do? And this is when I learned my first, Navy term I didn't know. It was called gun deck, right? I was like, what do you do? He was like, oh, I just gun deck. I was like, what's that? He's like, oh, I don't really, take the round. Only round I take is my last round. And what I thought about more, that like wasn't what I was about. You know what I'm saying? I was exposed to something different. Am I getting it right when it comes to moral injury or not?
Well, maybe not when it comes to gun decking, but so moral injury. So PTSD is a very normal reaction to fear. So our brain and our body go through kind of these mental and physical acrobatics to keep us safe. So PTSD reaction to trauma, but moral injury is really a reaction to shame. So it's very deeply rooted in shame. And so I love that you talked about, going through training, and then, you have this idea there, we come, they call it the service for a reason. And there is something simple and very pure about, our Navy values. We never leave a man behind, and we always do what's right. And then we, go for our first watch, or maybe we get deployed, or maybe we experience sexual assault, or we get hazed. And all of a sudden, things are not simple and not pure. And moral injury really just racks at our soul. It is very deep soul damage. So the research is pretty clear. So when it comes to moral injury, it actually has kind of three different subsets. So it's combat loss. So that's when we lose somebody. If in this case, it's for combat, and that's very specific, but I think this would also apply to like training exercises. Perpetration. So this is what the literature calls acts of omission or commission. So this is a big umbrella. Things we should have done, could have done, things we should have known, could have done, or didn't do. And then we have leadership betrayal. So leaders fuck up. We all mess up all the time, but leadership betrayal is especially egregious when it's especially capricious. It's targeted. This type of leadership betrayal is really kind of a step above just the regular fuck up. So think about, that always seems to be like a field grade officer too, but like a young major who always wants to go outside the wire so that they can get some action and get their combat action ribbon. And then your convoy gets blown up and you lose a great sailor.
put your people in danger.
Wow. That's, the kind of leadership betrayal. Acts of omission or commission. We got to talk about this, and this is uncomfortable. We're talking war crimes. Things. So, war crimes is one of them. So these are things that we did, things that we should have done, didn't do. So indiscriminate killing of civilians. And this is happening, by the way, across MOSs, across jobs, across gender identity, across services. This is not, these types of incidents, I think there are a lot, they happen more than we talk about because we don't talk about them, because talking about war crimes, that's a great way to go to jail. If you are looking to, go to mental health and talk about the war crime that you witnessed and see how quickly you get questioned.
Yeah.
So
see how confidential it is.
Yeah, exactly. Not okay. But this is happening. Killing of civilians. I come from an interrogation world. So we see this, unfortunately, all over the place with harsh interrogation techniques. They were lawful orders at the time, and it really just fucks you up in the end. There's a lot of things that happen in combat and in the military and in life that are not okay. And when we come at it, that's in a way that's pure and in a way that is simple, and we come at those with our ideals, and we lose battle buddies, we lose sailors for some capricious bullshit reason. It is really hard to say, well, they died for their country, when you're like, no, you died because somebody wanted a ribbon. Napoleon famously said, it's amazing what men will do for a piece of cloth. And I right? That one hurts my heart. But it's true. It's amazing what people will do for a combat action ribbon or a combat action badge, or what people will do for a Bronze Star. It is amazing what folks will do for a bullet point. And there is a lot of shit that goes on that is not okay. So moral injury it's soul damage. It is soul damage because we can't talk about it. Maybe we signed a non-disclosure agreement. Maybe we made a pact with our unit that we would never talk about what happened, because maybe we could be prosecuted for it. And moral injury it can be more damaging, because what happens in the literature is pretty clear, is that we resort to punishing ourselves. So we don't, we can't talk about it. So we'll isolate. We will talk about, isolate ourselves from our family members, from our support group, because only a monster would fill in the blank. Combat, when we're talking about leadership betrayal, there's another term that I would want to introduce that I hope will become in vogue, and that's institutional betrayal. And this is something that I researched, that I'm very passionate about. It's by a researcher named Jennifer Freyd, F-R-E-Y as in Yankee, D as in Delta, who's out on the University of Oregon, and she's fucking brilliant. And you probably know her for DARVO. So that's deny and reverse victim and oppressors. They got a South Park clip, very famous, but her research isn't military based. Her research is based in looking at the college campus system, and especially looking at schools with a really robust football program, and students coming forward and saying, listen, I was sexually assaulted, and then it getting swept right under the rug. So what happened, it's a different type of betrayal. And the reason why I bring this up is because MST is so prevalent that it has its own fucking acronym. It's like, really? This is how much MST and military sexual trauma is happening. We gave it its own acronym. Fuck. And so what I think it is analogous research, in that what these college students were saying is that, like, listen, not only did I get raped, was I sexually assaulted, but then I got fucked again by the system. The school went out of its way to discredit me, to disown me, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And, I love me some Sapper, and I'm not going to be a hater. But, everybody knows there is a lot of stuff that goes on with sexual assault. And we will go ahead and perhaps move the person. They'll do like a compassionate, what is it called? Compassionate reassignment or something like that.
Yeah.
And that is, it's tough. So we're talking about leadership betrayal in that sense, institutional betrayal. But when we're talking about moral injury is very specific to a combat milieu. The researchers are talking very specifically about combat. So that's like Jonathan Shea, and Brett Litz, who's out of the UMass Boston. So that research is very specific, but I think we could open up that aperture and say, wow, there's a lot of deep hurt that is going on within our military communities, and we don't talk about it a lot. I was thrilled, Damo, when you said, it's trending. I was like, oh shit, thank God, finally. If there's one thing I would love to trend, it's military mental health. That is like totally my thing. But yeah, moral injury, I don't think we talk about it a lot because it's super uncomfortable.
Yeah. And it's a lot deeper than me being told to gun deck on my first watch. It's a lot bigger, deeper than that.
But I think I think it's rooted though. I think you're right.
Yeah,
I mean, I love your story because it shows how, gosh, I loved basic training. I was that soldier.
Yeah.
I loved it. I was like, this is awesome. You get to dress up all day, wear face makeup, and sing songs. I was like, this is like theater camp. This is great. I loved it. And so, that's,
yeah. It's different. It's a different experience when you get there, and it's like, oh man, EM2 is drunk on duty, and this guy is doing this. I'm like, oh man, that's different than I thought it would be. But we talked about we waited till the end to talk about a lot of your qualifications and give the rundown, like the tail of the tape. But my question is, do you have any more plans for educate? Like, what's next for you when it comes to like education and degrees and stuff?
So I'm a PhD candidate right now. And so I'm going to get even,
congrats.
Thank you. More letters at the end of my name, because unfortunately, letters matter, and sometimes letters matter more than experience. And that's not okay, but it is what it is. But I think more importantly, we have Acknowledge and Heal coming out on August 26th. So this is a women's guide to PTSD. So I wrote it with author Katie Salidas. When the Soldier's Guide to PTSD came out in 2021, it was we got so many wonderful letters, and we got a ton of hate mail too. And I love me some hate mail because there's passion behind hate mail. And one of the criticisms that we got and we listened is that, listen, this is just too military specific. There needs to be a more hands-on guide, but something that it doesn't have all the F-bombs, and something I can read with my mom. Where's something I can give to my grandma? Where's something that I can give to my school teacher, or somebody who is not, rough and tumble? And I thought, you know what? That's valid. I own that. That is valid. The Soldier's Guide to PTSD is not for everybody. It is not the flavor for everyone, and that is okay. And so Acknowledge and Healed, a woman's focus guide to PTSD, is coming out on August 26th, which is International Women's Day. We're going to be doing a Facebook Live, which is always nerve-wracking. because
Mhm.
technology. But
Yeah.
thankfully, my co-author's a lot younger and hipper than I am. She's really amazing. And so we're
Okay.
going to be, don't worry, I got you, fam. But we're going to be releasing that. So with the Soldier's Guide to PTSD, we have a workbook also that's available. And the workbook was really, again, we got great feedback. We heard from folks at the VA who said, I really wish that I had this, a resource before I went for my compensation and pension exam. So before you get out of active duty, you'll go for your C&P exam, and that's to have your disability rating. And so with the Soldier's Guide, we made a workbook out of it so you can, no kidding, go through it and, here's the symptom. What is your experience? Here's the symptom. What's your experience? So you can write things out. So people learn, by hearing, seeing, or doing. And so for those of us who need to write it out, we have a workbook available. We have the Spanish language guide, the guia that'll be coming out more toward the end of the year. We're shooting for November right now, because everyone deserves to have access to this. And just because, English is the primary language doesn't mean that all of our sailors speak English, nor should they. And that's not what they're speaking at home, when they go on leave. So, everyone deserves access. Accessibility just really matters to me. Accessibility matters and representation matters. And so having a Spanish language guide that'll be coming out in November, and your listeners can pick up the audiobook. The link's going to be in the show notes. And I would also encourage your folks to come to thesoldiersblog.com. So at the Soldiers Blog, you can sign up for our newsletter, figure out all the cool stuff that's coming out. Like right now, we are looking for advanced reviewers for Acknowledge and Heal. So if you know anybody who is looking for a free book, you can sign up on our Facebook page. You can sign up at the blog. We've got a lot of cool resources available. The number one thing for us, and I'm speaking for our team, over at the PTSD Recovery Series, we really just believe in accessibility and representation and empowering people. And so anything that's going to help me get there, I just do not want sailors to make the same mistakes I did. And that's what I love about this podcast. You've lived your experience and you're passionate.
Yeah, we fucked up. I fucked up a lot. I messed up. But sometimes I was like, man, my mom got to hear this. Like, my mom listened to every episode. Like, it's like, man, she got to hear this shit that I did when I was 23 years old. But Jane, I got one more question for you.
Yeah.
First, like, I totally admire just your intention and purpose behind, what it is that you do and why you do it. It's almost like Robin Hood, like, especially knowing you went through it, came back. It's like, yeah, I went through this, I came back to help. It's almost like the analogy that you give at the end of your book that I don't want to spoil for any of the readers. So I love that you do that. But I wonder, like, what do you do for fun? What else do you do?
Oh, wow. Yeah, because
Good question.
going to graduate school, I spend a lot of time with my family and my dog. I mean, probably an obnoxious amount of time with my dog. He is just the love of my life. But, I know it sounds geeky, but I just really love what I do.
Yeah.
To get to pay it forward is such a reward in and of itself. And I love it. I love it. I also have great neighbors. I have great friends. Oh, I live in South Texas. I'm on the Texas border in a place called McAllen. We call it the South Pole of Texas. And I love it here. I live in a border community. I love this community. I love everything that we do and we represent. So, being part of my community, being with my friends here, my family, It feels
Yeah.
I
good.
know McAllen at. I think I was stationed in Texas in Texas. I was stationed in Kingsville.
Great.
So I remember
Oh,
seeing the signs to like, the McAllen. I remember
yeah,
that.
it's like 4
Seeing
hours
those
south.
signs. Yeah,
Very,
south. Yeah.
very south. And
Mm.
yeah, it's faster for me to go to Mexico than to Costco. And
Mm, yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. The community here is unbelievable, and the food. So when you guys come down, I'll get you fat.
I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
I know probably some good barbecue. Yeah, I'm wondering what. I'm
So
ready for.
good.
So do you turn it? Do you ever turn off being a therapist? You ever
Oh
like?
yeah.
Okay,
Oh
all right,
yeah.
okay.
That's funny. People will be like, "Are you analyzing me right now?" And I'm like, "No, like
Yeah.
nothing going on." I even when I get home, my husband's amazing, but I'm like, "Okay, hey, I need the buffer, like the non-talk buffer."
Hmm.
Because I've been listening to folks all day and I'm like, "Babe,
Yeah.
love you. I need the buffer." He's like, "Roger that. Yeah, carry on, do your thing." And and it's doing, yeah, I do a lot of things just to unwind every day and every week. So I do a lot of self care. So I'm part of a therapy group. I really believe in group therapy, and I'm a member of an online therapy group. Um, that's been amazing. Absolutely
Hmm.
amazing. I play unnecessarily aggressive games of words with friends with my older brother. And any of
Yeah,
you who grew up with Scrabble in your household, yeah, that
yeah.
was
That's
my
me and
house.
it's me and
Um,
Angeline.
yeah, I'm really close with my brother, with my cousins. Yeah, but I turn it off. I zone out a lot. Um, yeah, it's there's time for it, and then there's a time to chill.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, I don't. I'm not, in general, I'm not, just like, like when I was an interrogator in the army, I wasn't, maybe I was a little too aggressive in asking people questions, but I wasn't interrogating them. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'm not looking, like, do you want to talk about your mommy issues?
yeah.
No, no, it's about having really healthy boundaries too. So, my friend had a pillow made. It was an old timey needlepoint pillow, and it said something to the effect of, "I'd prefer not to." Like, thank you, but I'd prefer not
Yeah,
to.
like
And so like my neighbor, she's a little out there, but she's like, "Oh, so I heard you're a therapist. Will you be my therapist?" I was like, "Hard no, kiddo. Hard no.
no.
Like, that's a
Yeah.
hard no. Like, thank
Let
you,
me
no,
have
thank
you
you."
how I have you. Hey, Virginia, it's been a great conversation. I was looking forward to, talking to you. I'm sure Damon might have another question, but I was looking forward to talking to you just because I believe in your mission, and I believe it's a lot similar to what our mission is,
Yes.
and that's to kind of give a palatable conversation to people in a way that they could digest it. I know the woman's book is going to be palatable for them. Who knows? Maybe one day it'll be a book for teens and a book for adolescents. And I'm gonna keep watching. I'm gonna stick around. I'm gonna keep watching. I'm gonna try to sneak into the Facebook Live, maybe pop my head in there for a second. But I really do appreciate what you're doing. It's inspirational. Um, a lot of the things you say, a lot of the things you said in the book, a lot of the things you said to me, I've listened to other podcasts that you did. A lot of those things stick, and I appreciate that those are things that you have. And anybody that get to talk to you, they're at least going to hear like 2 or 3 of those things and it's going to stay with them. So thank you. And I think it's something that our young sailors really need to hear. So I'm glad you came and sat with us. I was really, really looking forward to this. And we sit down for over 2 hours almost every time we talk. I'm glad you was able to sit down for over 2 hours. It wasn't too much um, things we had to do first. It wasn't a writer. It was just, hey, let's sit down, let's talk. And I appreciate that. So thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, same for me, man. Thank you very much for sitting with us. Your passion is just like
Yeah, Damon love that type of stuff.
contagious.
Yeah,
Contagious.
David
And I
love
and I and I love it.
that.
Um but also, I want to say, for anybody that's listening also, is that like you're not just talking, you can back what you're talking about with research and data. So I love that, man. You ain't just out here just talking, you can back it up. So I love all that stuff. And like I said again, man, thank you for coming on. And it was a joy. It was most definitely a joy.
Oh, thank you both so much. I was really looking forward to coming and seeing you because I do feel like very simpatico.
Mhm.
You guys love your sailors. I mean, that comes across, and you really care. I mean, my gosh, can you imagine what your life would be like if you had a chief like you?
Yeah, crazy.
Wow.
Are even
I
like
know.
this podcast, or even like that, like, and I hate to say that, right? But are even this podcast like, damn, if I had something like this, it'd be so much easier.
You're paying it forward. You're paying it
Yeah,
forward. And I love what you do. I love your mission. I love your passion. And I just love how much you love the Navy. I think that's awesome.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
best to your families. And thank you so much for all you do for our community, really. And thank you for caring.
yeah. We
Thank you.
appreciate you. Free, y'all better get that free book. Y'all that's listening. Virginia is giving away a free book. The book that we've been talking about, this great book that we've been talking about, all podcasts, it's going to be free. It's going to be in the episode notes. It's going to be on YouTube in the notes too. So again, thanks, Virginia. We appreciate you. Thank you so much.